Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. In front of us today on the bench for review, we have the Seiko SSOB401P1. Stay tuned for this one. All right, ladies and gentlemen, as usual, let's go ahead and unpack the specs for this handsome timepiece. For the case diameter, you have a 41mm case size, 12.3mm thick, and 49mm lug to lug. You have a lug width of 22mm. Case material is going to be the industry standard 316L stainless steel. For the crystal, you have Seiko's proprietary Harlex crystal. The lume is also going to be Seiko's Lumibrite. You have a water resistant of 100 meters with no screw down crown. For the movement that's housed in this watch, you have Seiko's in-house caliber AT63, which is a mecaquartz chronograph movement. This, of course, is going to be a quartz movement with an accuracy rating of plus minus 15 seconds per month. You have a battery life of 3 years depending on how often you actuate that chronograph. Complications include a 24-hour subdial equipped with a small seconds hand at the 6 o'clock. You have a 60-minute subdial at the 9 o'clock in 1/5 of a second increments, a date display between the 4 and 5 o'clock marker as well. I usually start with the dial due to my obsession with dials, but I believe that the highlight of the Seiko is the case. It has the silhouette of the Zenith Chronomaster Revival with the perfect balance between brush and polish, and these extreme facets that create the illusion of a smaller case. And even though this watch is housing a chronograph movement, it still retains a wearable thickness of 12.3mm. At first I thought the 22mm lug width would be too much, but I see now it's the perfect width for this case design and size. You also have the welcome inclusion here of drilled lugs, which is going to allow for easier exchanges between straps. Although you don't have a screw down crown or chronograph pushers, Seiko still rates this watch at 100 meters of water resistant. Now, talking about the chronograph pushers, Seiko did a fantastic job here distinguishing the difference between the start and reset. On the start push button, you're going to have it protrude a little bit more than the reset. And then Seiko also put this little black ring around that push start chronograph to allow you to identify it easily. Moving on to the strap. This strap is constructed nicely. The hardware is robust and the finish matches the case perfectly. The Seiko logo on the buckle seems to be stamped rather than etched. The material for the strap is double layered with a high quality glue and stitching. That will explain the initial stiffness of the strap that will soften over time with wear. The color on the strap matches the dial flawlessly, and the black stripe contrasts nicely with the text on the tachymeter and the dial, also making the black ring on the chronograph pusher pop. Also keep in mind this watch is already 12.3mm thick, which is borderline too thick. You're going to add about another 2mm of thickness with this double loop NATO strap. I'd probably recommend putting it on a leather strap or even a rubber strap to give it a more subdued presence on the wrist. The dial. Where do I start? I guess with the chapter ring in the form of this top plate. I see what Seiko did here. They put the dial under the plate, giving the dial of this watch a three-dimensional look. I firmly believe that Seiko is the king of dials in both the entry and high horology market. The Seiko logo at the 12 o'clock is applied with the high polish finish, matching the faceted indexes. The 60-minute chrono subdial at the 9 o'clock and the 24-hour subdial at the 3 o'clock, along with the small second subdial at 6 o'clock, gives this dial the perfect balance. I'm usually not a fan of date windows on chronograph because I feel they are busy enough with the subdials, but it's executed perfectly and hidden in plain sight between the 4 and 5 o'clock marker. To put it simply, this three-dimensional dial is visible from just about every angle. Complemented by those ridges on the dial make this a perfect execution. I'm usually not a fan of Harlex crystal, but the Harlex crystal on this watch does a fantastic job at reducing glare, and the chamfered edge gives this watch a premium look. Now, that Harlex crystal protrude a bit too much and makes this crystal prone to accidental impacts and potential damage over time. I would probably recommend picking up a valve of Cell Helmet liquid glass, and I'll put that in the description below. But essentially what that would do for you, it will reinforce this Harlex crystal and increases longevity. It's essentially a chemical compound of silicon dioxide that reinforces different types of glass and crystals on a molecular level. It essentially fills in the pores that are naturally found in these materials. Let's talk a little bit more about Harlex. It's very similar to mineral crystal in many ways. The Harlex crystal, on the other hand, is going to give you an additional layer of durability. Now, the downfall to Harlex is that Seiko does not sell directly to consumers. They only sell directly to authorized repair centers. Hence the reason why I'm not a fan of Harlex. In the event that you shatter your crystal, you would have to source it through the secondary market, through places like eBay or AliExpress in order to replace the crystal in the event that you need to. Now, on the flip side of that coin, the perks of owning a Seiko is the endless amount of upgrades you can do to your watch, including that of the crystal, if you wanted to upgrade it, say, to a sapphire crystal with AR coating, and that is available on the secondary market by the boatload. Flipping the watch over, you can take a look at that screw down back. That's going to contribute to the 100 meters of water resistant. Seiko's flawlessly finished this back with a circular brush and then high polishes on the back side of the case. Moving back to the front side, you can take a look at the 22mm lug width, which is very well proportioned to the overall case size, and the design of this case helping keep everything well balanced. Looking at an area that's commonly overseen by many brands, the spring bars. The spring bars are a very high quality and a welcome inclusion from Seiko. A little area I want to point out, so when measuring this watch from the 12 o'clock to the 6 o'clock, you'll notice that's where the measurements of 41mm come from. But if you measure it from the side, you'll notice that this watch measures in at 40mm, and that's the reason why this watch wears smaller than the specs would imply. And that goes back to what I was saying about the faceted edges, giving the illusion of a smaller case than the specs would indicate. And that is further emphasized by the dramatic drop off of the lugs. I also like the way Seiko did this high polished bezel, making this watch shimmer in the light and giving it that extra oomph on the wrist. Now, as we approach the ending of this video, I want to talk a little bit about why I respect Seiko as a brand. Their ability to manufacture just about every single part of their watches in-house, including the movement. Now, that's a good segue into our next topic. The movement. This watch is housing a special movement, which is the mecaquartz AT63 movement. And for those of you who are not too familiar with mecaquartz, it essentially combines the best of both worlds, the accuracy of quartz and the mechanical mechanisms to power the chronograph. It is the mechanical parts that is responsible for the smooth sweeping of that chronograph hand. As I mentioned earlier in the video, the caliber AT63 has an accuracy rating of plus minus 15 seconds per month according to Seiko. I'm willing to bet it's going to be a lot better than that. The battery life is approximately 3 years depending on how often you activate that chronograph. Complications included with this watch is a 24-hour subdial equipped with a small seconds hand at the 6 o'clock. You have a chronograph subdial up to 60 minutes and 1/5 of a second increments. You also have a date display between the 4 and 5 o'clock markers. Now, as you all know, when I review a quartz movement, I always talk about the seconds hand and how accurate it is in hitting every single marker. This has a small seconds hand and it's not going to be as obvious, but what I will say is that it's not that accurate with this movement. All right, without further ado, here is the on the wrist shot. What is a review without this, right? So here you have it on the provided NATO strap from Seiko. Marries the watch nicely. It's a very fun strap to wear with this watch, but it does add a little bit of height to the watch on the wrist. I also have it here on this rich watch band leather strap. It gives it a beautiful, classy, dressy look to it. So let's think about this watch. It's very versatile. You can put just about every strap possible on here. In fact, I'm sure if you can find a bracelet that marries this watch perfectly, it's gonna look outstanding on a bracelet. All right, in this next scene here, you'll see it. I have it on this blue rubber strap that has these ridges up at the top towards the case that create these channels to allow ventilation to keep the wrist from sweating. Overall, making it a very pleasant wearing experience, and most importantly, making the watch look fantastic on the wrist. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. This is my review on the Seiko SSOB401P1. There's gotta be a better name for this watch. I'm gonna nickname this one the Chronomaster. With that said, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do so. Drop a comment and a like below, and don't forget to hit that bell icon so you're notified of future video releases. This was your host, Laz. Till the next one.